committee this evening. The first item on the agenda is an election of chairman for the 2018-19 municipal year. So can I ask if there are any nominations for the role of chairman?
I propose Councillor Tim Bolton.
And is there a seconder?
Yes.
Seconded. Can we vote on that, please? Thank you very much.
Did you vote for yourself?
I don't feel one should.
I hereby declare that Councillor Holton be chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members, having faith in me again for a third year, so thank you very much. The second item then on the agenda is to appoint the vice chair for this year, and I would like to nominate Councillor Bowring. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Malcolm. All those in favour? Okay, that's unanimous, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, I'll now do the introduction to the meeting. So, good evening and welcome to the Woking Borough Council Planning Committee. We've got the PA system, which you have now noticed. Mobile phones should be switched off or on silent, and there are no fire drills planned. The proceedings are filmed and will be available on the Woking Borough website. You will see from the camera position that the committee members, council officers and registered speakers will normally be recorded, but speakers may ask not to be filmed, but their comments will be audio recorded. The Planning Committee is made up of 9 elected members, and I now ask them to introduce themselves by name and ward, starting on my far right.
Councillor Angus Ross, representing Woking without ward.
Wayne Smith, representing Hurst.
Michelle Jeffrey-Day, representing Winnish.
John Jarvis, representing Twyford.
Chris Barry, Abington.
Yeah, Tim Holton, Hawkden in Lower Early.
Bill Soane, representing Loven in Woodley.
Malcolm Richards, representing Norreys in Woking Town.
And I'm Carl Doran, representing Bournemouth and Whitegates.
Thank you very much. We are supported and advised by a variety of professional council officers, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves by name and function, starting on my far right.
Callum Wynham, I'm clerk to the committee.
My name is Neil Allen, I'm the legal advisor to the committee.
Conor Corrigan, I'm the strategic development manager.
Chris Easton, I'm the service manager for Highways Development Management.
Thank you very much. I will introduce the planning officers when they come forward to do their application. The procedure. This is a quasi-judicial committee with formal set procedures and conduct. Firstly, the planning officer will present each application. Then I will call in turn only those who are pre-registered to speak. Please come forward to the table. The microphone is controlled by the grey button on the base. The time limit of 3 minutes for each category of speaker will be strictly enforced. So please ensure you get your key points across within the allotted time. Members of the committee are interested in the quality of what you have to say and not for how long that you speak. And I emphasise again that only those who are pre-registered to speak may do so. Following the planning officer's presentation and the comments of registered speakers, planning committee members will consider a question and seek clarification for the application and hopefully reach a decision which may or may not agree with the planning officer's recommendation. Finally, a reminder, the local planning authority's role is to determine any valid planning application using local and national planning policy. Our role is not to suggest alterations to schemes, whether they're a good idea or indeed needed, whether they are too costly or whether there are alternative uses. Thank you very much. Before I go on to the agenda, we do have 2 members to the committee and I would like to welcome them. Firstly, Carl Doran, so welcome. And Chris, who's actually been on the committee before, so he's come back. And so he's actually been vice chair before, so I'm confident he's going to be very good as my right-hand man in this committee. Thank you. And I would like to thank Councillor Kaiser, who for the last couple of years has been my deputy chair. He's now gone on to greater things as the mayor of the council, but I do deeply thank him for what he did. And Philip Holdsworth had been on the committee for a good number of years, and he's now left, and I would like to go on the record minutes my appreciation for all the work that he did. Right, on to the third item then, which is apologies, and I know there are no apologies as everyone's here. Right, minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any amendments that anyone wishes to make? No, they're accurate then. So please show of hands to accept the minutes. Thank you very much. Does anyone need to declare an interest in any of the applications? Okay, thank you. Are there any applications to be deferred or withdrawn?
No, Chair.
Okay, so then we move on to the first application then, which is item 7. That's on page 9. It's the specialist housing site. It's the reserved matters application of a building comprising 80 extra care units. Access, layout, scale and appearance of landscaping are the only things that we're considering. It's before the committee, it's a major application, and the case officer, who I'm handing over to now, is Christopher Howard.
Thank you, Chairman. The proposal is, as the Chairman has described, the applicant for this application is Evolution, Law Homes, Bovis Homes and Anchor. Anchor will be the end user operator of the extra care housing. Just to put this into context, there's been a lot done on the South End for STL since the approval of the Outline Planning Permission. Outline Planning Permission was granted for the site in 2012 for 1,200 dwellings, together with 150 extra care units and a new village centre. The latter of which will be subject to consideration tonight. The Outline Planning Permission established a principle of development, quantum of development, access to the site, together with development parameters. Here is the Shinfield West planning unit outlined in red. The area for the village centre expansion is shown in blue and was established by the parameters of the Shinfield West Planning Commission. The relationship of the village centre expansion is shown in respect by the blue star, which sits roughly over School Green. The existing medical practices shown by the yellow star. The extra care housing will be located roughly where the red star is to the west of the existing doctor surgery. It's important to note that this is a tandem application for the care home to the south of the application site by a different operator, which will form the entire expected extra care housing for the Shinfield West Planning Unit. This will be presented to members following this agenda item. Through taking this approach, through having both applications before us, there is a comprehensive picture of how the specialist housing will be delivered. The existing land use is predominantly agricultural, although the land has been cleared in preparation for housing. The current application is for specialist housing, which will be for the occupants that have some form of care of need. The design of the home has been well considered to ensure the residents can remain in their houses as their level need changes over time. The following couple of slides are in respect to delivery to date for Shinfield West and established perimeters, as a significant amount of progress has been made since the approval of the outline scheme, and again, this is further context for the site. We set the context for the design approach to the specialist housing. A key enabling application for the specialist housing was the approval of the reserve matters for the primary infrastructure for the site. This includes roads, landscaping and drainage. The majority of the infrastructure has now been delivered on site, which means the developers effectively have service parcels. This will help accelerate housing delivery across the site and facilitate access to the extra care housing. Bus stops are also agreed. The closest bus stop will be where the sign is shown, which will be running in September 2019. There are also existing bus stops on Hollow Lane. Phasing was also approved as a conditions discharge application, and this plan shows the phasing for the site. As shown on the plan, light blue is the phase 1 development. Work is well underway for housing delivery within these parcels. In pink is phase 2 and green phase 3. The village centre forms part of the phase 2 of the delivery of the site. In addition to this, a design brief was approved for the village centre. This established overarching principles of the site, such as road widths, building heights, land use and landscaping. This will help ensure the overarching design principles are adhered to as other elements of the village centre are brought forward. The design brief also had a section in respect to the specialist housing with the site identified. An illustrative image was also included within the design brief as shown here. In addition, the design code was approved as a conditions discharge application for the entire site. This set out the principles for the buildings within the site. 6 key areas were identified, 2 of which are relevant to this application. The avenue is the main route through the site. Building heights here are taller and street widths are designed to accommodate buses. The anchor scheme will front onto this. The neighbourhood loop is less formal and has a wide variety of building types, and the proposed extra care housing site will side on to this on the western side. In addition, the Castle Oak scheme for the next agenda item will also face onto the neighbourhood loop. Reserve matters has also been approved for the majority of the housing. This slide shows the relationship of the site in respect to phase 1 and 2 housing parcels. The anchor site is located to the east of the main housing area and would be wrapped by housing to the north and west of the site. The site will be accessed by Hollow Lane as agreed by design brief and subsequent condition discharge applications. Now looking at the specifics of the scheme itself, get it out. This is proposed, this is the application site that is shown here in context of the housing, and the site is shown outlined in red. The site fronts onto the avenue character area as identified by design brief for the village centre. The proposed layout of the building is shown here with the associated landscaping and parking. The building fronts onto the avenue and the building will face outwards towards the neighbourhood loop character area on the western side. The plans include a communal garden outdoor space which is segregated from the parking. In terms of parking, there's 56 spaces and the highways officer is satisfied with the provision of parking. Landscaping is also included within the gardens and the car parking area and on the front of the building, and the landscape officer supports the proposal. This slide shows the layout of the building in context of the Castle scheme, which is shown at the bottom of the slide. This is the Castle scheme, which will be on the next agenda item. The layout of both buildings shows a comprehensive approach to the delivery of the area allocated for the extra care housing, and the buildings will form a perimeter block around the allocated site with buildings fronting onto the main road. These are the elevations of the building. The proposal incorporates a 4-storey element fronting onto the avenue. The approach frames the gateway to the village centre from the main housing site and helps identify a different area to the main housing site. The applicant has carefully considered the massing of the building by incorporating details such as render to break up the building and balconies to provide horizontal and vertical emphasis. These provide useful outdoor amenity space for future occupants. The height of the building is in accordance with the parameter plans at 13 metres. The final slide shows a perspective view of the care home with this elevation fronting onto the avenue. The top view is taken from just the opposite of doctor's surgery, facing towards the main Shinfield West housing unit, and would be located beyond this. Below is a view taken from the side of the building, which would front onto the neighbourhood loop. The recommendation is to approve the application subject to the conditions and set out a report and those in the members' update as amended. In terms of the members' update, there's a few points on here. Page 9 of the committee report, correction to the summary section of the report, the site is to the west of Hollow Lane. On page 13, add the label informative below condition 8, just above the informatives that are set out there. Page 26, paragraph 23, error numbering, renumber to 24 and number up subsequent paragraphs. Paragraph 50, the flats meets the internal space standards. And on page 29, paragraph 51, the balconies range from a minimum of 9 metres squared to 20 metres squared. There was an additional element on here which somehow got missed off on various drafts of this, but it's in terms of cycle parking, and I referred to it in the report that we were looking for further cycle parking on the site. The applicant has increased the covered cycle parking storage area from 3 to 5, and in addition they provided 10 Sheffield stands for the site, and the highways officer is satisfied that a suitable cycle provision for the site. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. The first registered speaker then is Elizabeth Fowler, the agent. If you'd like to come forward, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Elizabeth Fowler and I work for Pegasus Group, who are the planning consultants for both applications being heard today in relation to the Shinfield West Specialist Housing site, which, as you heard, was granted permission in 2012 as part of the wider Shinfield West development. The specialist housing site has been split between 2 developers who both specialise in providing accommodation for older people in need of care, Anchor and Castle Oak. And although the site's been progressed separately, the applications for reserve matters have been brought forward by the 2 developers together in order that you can consider them together. Your case officer has set down a detailed summary of the background, proposals and assessment against the parameters, set down outline stage as well as some local context, so I'm not going to go over that again. I'm just going to give a brief summary of the type of accommodation provided by Anchor. As we've heard from Chris, Anchor's proposal is for 80 extra care units on the northern part of the site, designed for persons of a minimum age of 55 years and who have a requirement for some degree of personal care. Anchor will operate the site once it's complete. There'll be staff on site 24 hours a day, and a significant amount of floor space is to be used for provision of communal facilities for residents. The intention is to offer people the option of moving into a new home with their spouse, if relevant, when they start to acknowledge a need for assistance, but where the accommodation is designed to be adaptable to increase levels of care as time goes on. This means that moving forward, those persons can stay in their own home as their care needs increase and they live within a community environment of people in a similar situation to themselves. We sought to work cooperatively with the Council, engage in a useful, constructive pre-application discussions and officers clear and communicative approach throughout the process has been very gratefully received, and we've sought to work together with them throughout. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we have Councillor Batman, the ward member. Would you like to come forward? Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, members and officers. I'm here representing myself and my fellow ward councillors also feel they have the same sort of views as I have. We've been looking at the whole situation here, and it's a flagship development as far as we're concerned and as far as the parish is concerned, in that we want to make it a focal point of the whole of Shinfield, and therefore anything that is going to be built in that area needs to be in keeping with what we hope is going to be the future structure with the new community centre and other parts within it. And our view is that this development proposal really goes against some of the views that we have had on the way that this should operate. Now, on page 45 in your agenda, you'll find that the Parish Council comments related to this, and we very much are in sympathy with them with regard to that. We do feel that the four-storey structures isn't necessarily in keeping with the area. We're also concerned about the external appearance. Certainly the photograph that you see on page 35, where there are what looks like fire escapes rather than what we consider to be proper residential properties with regards to this. And we would have hoped that there was a better visual appearance that was going to be proposed for this. So we take the view that the same Parish Council that there needs to be more work done before we would like to see this matter approved.
Thank you very much. Before I open it to members, I'll just ask for the officer to come back on those 2 points. The 4 stories being out of keeping with the rest of the area, and the external appearance, particularly looking, as was suggested by the ward member, looking like fire escapes. Can you just comment on those 2, please?
Appreciate 4 stories is, so to speak, always people prefer 3. This building is no higher than the existing parameters. Indeed, if we look at the building next door to the site, this is 12.5 metres high. So you've got the bulk of the roof there, and this building, the building we're proposing tonight, is only going to be half a metre higher. In terms of the needs of the operator, there is a sort of critical mass issue here as well in terms of having enough bedrooms to operate at a profit. So they need that extra level of accommodation in order to have a functioning care home. We wouldn't be able to get the level of care on the site if it didn't have the 4-storey element. We'd be losing sort of numbers of units on the site. So because of our parking standards and everything else, there wouldn't be any further space to fit that on the site. So, and I think the 4-storey element, we are looking for a gateway into the village centre, and we need something to distinguish it from the main housing area, and I think that it's been sensibly done in accordance to the character area approach. You see the building at the bottom here on this diagram. This is along the avenue, which is the main road, which is meant to be taller, and this is on a neighbourhood loop, and the applicant has carefully considered this in context of the design code itself to ensure that these are slightly different in terms of appearance, because otherwise, due to the length of the building, it's very difficult to break the building up like that. So I think that's achieved it really well, and I think the design works on the building. So also, I'll just go back to the design code that was approved, and this here is a representation of what's going to come forward. This is approved as part of the conditions discharge application, and this is it's a three-storey building but with a flat roof as well, and also got the parapets for the additional space. We'll get the mouse up here. So it's no higher than approved parameters, and I feel that it's making best use of space on the site and provides an entrance to the village centre, which we are looking for. In terms of the balconies, I think they're usable outdoor space. I really encourage it on our applications. People need outdoor areas to sit and have coffee and enjoy themselves. And I don't really get that they look like fire escapes. Not from my mind in terms of what I've seen sort of in films and stuff like that. They don't really seem to be, to me, fire escapes. They're usable outdoor space for the occupants, future occupants of the flats.
Thank you very much. I shall now open it up to members. Who would like to go first? Michelle?
Okay. Two questions. How many staff are going to be at this site, and where is the staff parking and visitor parking? And lastly, are there any sprinklers in this site? Since they will be having people who have mobility problems getting out, sprinklers would stop fires from spreading quicker through these areas.
In terms of the staff numbers, it's 15 for the sites over a 24-hour period. The parking is combined for staff and visitors. And in terms of sprinkler systems, I'm not aware there are sprinkler systems fitted to the site, although Liz or the operators might. Sorry, not planning, no, it's not.
Should you say it now?
It's not a planning issue.
Safety of the residents, isn't it?
Michelle, I'm going to say the officer will tell us what legislation that comes in on. We most certainly do care about the residents, and that is in the forefront of our thoughts.
Yeah, unfortunately, sprinklers is not planning consideration, it's building regs consideration, so it falls with outside planning. So as officers, we can't determine that as being a deciding factor whether a building has or hasn't got it.
John?
Yeah, I'm looking at the balconies. They seem to me not to be waterproof and therefore not usable if there's wet weather, even though they do appear to have roofs over them. Is that a consideration?
Turn your mic, please. Turn your mic.
They've got a degree of coverage over the top, so you've got the roofs, and each balcony floor will act as a roof. But in inclement weather, you may not use them all the time, all year round, as you wouldn't your garden probably. So you'll have days where you can sit out on them, and days where rain might get blown onto you. But that's how the gardens work.
Malcolm?
Just a couple of quick ones. If the things are quite dark, if the balconies are quite dark and people are concerned about them looking like fire escapes, they don't, but if they were concerned, it's something that could presumably be rectified by having a different colour material there instead of black bars, if that's something that may be worth considering. And the second one is there a lift in there? Are there any lifts?
There are lifts in the building, within the building. I think there's two, at least two. And in terms of the materials for the balconies, they're subject to a condition, so we can take a look at those if they are taken down, if people feel that they want something that's a little bit more light. I quite like the way they sort of break up the elevations of the building, but with design, it's Marmite, you either like it, you don't hate it, and it's what one person likes, not everybody likes. So.
And lifts are located in places that cover all of the accesses, all of the properties, are they?
Yes, they are.
Okay, thank you.
I have Angus Stenzel.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 points. First, there was a question raised by the parish about whether, for the two sites, the parking could be merged. Now, I know the shape of the site might not lead to that, but that's the first question, is whether that was considered, or whether there's any practicality in looking at that. I'll come back to another point.
In terms of car parking, because it's run by two different operators, there's a need for a degree of segregation between the care homes. The lower care home, the Castle Oak scheme, will be for end users who have a greater need of care. So the gardens for that scheme are located close to the building, and unfortunately we did look at seeing if we could co-locate both, but I think because of the different end user requirements of them, it isn't possible to bring those two together in this instance.
Thank you. The other point is I accept what Conor said about the planning not being applicable for sprinklers, but surely it is the council's policy in such buildings to have sprinklers, and maybe we can't do anything here tonight, but I am concerned that the scheme has come forward without that consideration by the council overall, because of course it's one of these things that unless you design it in at the beginning, it doesn't become a practical proposition.
Thank you. Bill?
Yeah, it's just a technical point. You say that there are lifts, and yet on the elevations on the drawings that were shown, and that one there, I'm not an engineer, I'm an architect, but I would thought the lifts, they had a housing on the roof, which would have added to the height. Is that not the case? I don't know. Go back. Where you were?
Yeah, I'll just try to follow this.
There. Yeah. If you take the 4-storey, there's nothing shown in there for a lift housing, which normally, I think, I don't know, would go on the roof, which would have added to the height of the elevation.
As I understand, there's different methods of construction for the lifts, and that's something that you know, it may well be that that is contained internally with the building, or it's sort of bottom fed lift.
Right. Yeah.
So, on that point, if it did turn out that it had to go on top of the roof, what would happen in terms of the planning?
We would either seek a non-material amendment, depending on how high they were, because the lift shafts are sort of, I think they're located in this end of the building. I'll just double check in terms of their location. So I think a lot of the lift shafts are within the building with a pitched roof on it, so they can be accommodated.
Quite some distance from the flat roof, isn't it?
I think in terms of that, we would either ask for a non-material amendment, or if it was what we felt a material amendment, then we'd ask for a material amendment application, which we could either bring back here if necessary, if required.
Right, I have Wayne, then Michelle.
You mentioned earlier, the height of 12.3 metres high. And I fully understand one's flat roof, one isn't. But what is the absolute limitation or the height restriction?
The limitation is set on the parameter plans for the Shinfield West Planning Commission, and it's 13 metres above existing ground levels. So there's ordnance datum, and there are certain limits that were set on that application in terms of how high the buildings can go. These are within this. On other sites where they've had to raise ground levels significantly, we've also accepted marginal increases above those levels, because in the grand scheme of things, it wouldn't have made a huge amount of difference.
Because I do have, I know what you say about one person's design is another person's nightmare. When you look at page 35, it does remind me of the kind of flats that were built in the 60s. It's quite stark, it's flat, it's not very imaginative, it's got flat roofs. And I would have thought, I'll go back to if we are under a restriction of 13 metres, I would have thought if, as one of the councillors said, this is a showcase, this is the best of the best in Shinfield, you'd be probably better if you need to get the numbers in, achieving a ridge height higher than 13 to make that end building look more attractive. But just my comment that I agree with the comments made by the council and the parish council. It looked very dated to me.
I think there's, in terms of your comments on the elevations on paper look quite flat. Next to the building there, you've got a mixture of outcrops going along the frontage of the building, which break the building up. I disagree that it's 1960s in its form because it's moved on from that flat frontage. Yes, you did get to the 1960s. There's outcrops here, bits of interest, landscaping to the front of the building. And to get another roof, another storey for a pitched roof, you're talking another sort of 4 or 5 metres. So you're really pushing, well, we would have to revisit the outline planning commission in effect.
Rochelle?
2 questions. One question in particular, how many cars are you expecting the residents to have? Because you said the residents themselves may be in extra care, but they may have partners who aren't in extra care. And my father lived in one of those type developments, and there was quite a few cars from the, they had younger partners or older partners who were in better shape than they were. Second comment more, it does look like the 60s revised. I was around in the 60s. It wasn't particularly a nice time. That design doesn't look particularly nice either. It's not it's very basic. It's not really a showcase design. Let's put it that way.
Rochelle, just picking up on the parking element. As Chris has mentioned earlier, obviously there is parking right over the site. It does comply, obviously, researching.
I was wondering how many people are you expecting to have cars?
Well, it really depends. There's a variation of what could have, but in terms of obviously the scheme and the council's parking standards we have, obviously in terms of the staff numbers and the visitors and the people living there, it complies with the standards we have. You've got the neighbourhood centre, we've got the frequent bus service that runs through the site that is going to start operating, obviously, in the next year directly through the site, as well as obviously, not to mention the district centre coming forward, and the fact that there is, if there should need to be, then the district centre obviously has parking as well, but it's not expected that it should be required.
So you can't give me a guesstimate on how many you expect to have?
I couldn't take it. I don't know how many old people still like to drive. I mean, it can be from any age. So yes, some may still have cars, some may not. It's not something, but in terms of the parking standards, it complies. So it's not something I could pin down for you.
Just to say, Rochelle, it is the parking standards which is the important thing, and we've been told by the officer it meets that. Chris? Oh, sorry.
Thank you. I don't know if members were proposing to refuse on the basis of the appearance, but I think we have to be careful. We continue to try to improve the design. We're here to see if it's in accordance, in this case, with the parameter plans and planning policy in general. And I think it largely is, so I would reject any attempt to refuse on that basis. With Malcolm mentioned the colour of bars and a condition was mentioned, I think. I don't know, is that something we might consider modifying? Yeah.
You normally wouldn't control colour paint, so if you could, they're obviously grey in this one. You could, as part of the reserve banners, request a different colour. I think the only good thing about grey is it does blend in a bit more. I don't know if you've seen white balconies, they stand out quite a lot. And a lot of modern buildings, I suppose you look at them, and they do have that tone to them. I mean, they do match the windows, I think, in that one as well. No. So there is a symmetry that goes across the building by doing that. But I mean, it's certain. We can certainly talk to the operator about if that's a really strong feeling for the locals. I think in terms of design, it's very, very subjective. I know you say it looks like a very 60s building. I think you said a 70s building. But there's lots of flat roof buildings out there, and they, in my opinion, look good. But it is subjective, and that's the problem with design. One person's great design is another person's terrible design. So it's a very difficult tightrope to walk, unfortunately.
Malcolm?
Just a very quick follow-up. You said there's a certain number of parking spaces. Fine, I don't know if that's enough, but if it meets a standard, it's okay. But I don't know what parking is like in that area generally. Will those parking spaces be monitored or policed in any way to, if for instance there's a problem in the local area, what stops people coming in parking?
Yeah, I think Chris has obviously already highlighted the fact that the outline application has been determined. which has a parking management strategy associated with it. In terms of the scheme that's coming forward, there's other parcels that have already been delivered within that facility and will still to be delivered, and they all comply with the council's, the ones that have come forward so far, the ones that will come forward will ensure comply with the council's parking standards, and obviously they'll be in front of you, or have been previously, for a review and assessment. So in terms of the scheme itself and the other parcels that are coming forward, I think the whole thing has come forward already, the rest of the site. Yeah. And that's already been in front of the committee for 600 units came through on the reserve back to this application, which...
So the parking will be managed in some way, just not outside, is it?
Yeah, well, every unit, we're obviously looking at this scheme on-site moment, but obviously the rest of the on-site, but off of this site, complies with the council standard in terms of parking in relation to unallocated, allocated and visitor parking place. But as we said, there is the parking management strategy that's secured also as part of the wider application.
Okay, thank you.
John? Yes, looking at the drawings, there are 80 units here with 1 and 2 bedroom, which is about around 120 people there. But you've only got 5 car parking spaces for disabled people. Is that within the rule, within our core planning, or it seems a lot less when we've got over 80 units for extra care?
Yeah. This one isn't the extra care part, is it? This is the more retirement.
It says extra care.
It's assisted care, so they've got the ability. But in terms of the parking, it's managed by a parking, it's managed independently. This site is by an independent operator. It's something that we've had previously. I wouldn't necessarily prefer to see the spaces marked out as disabled bays, because if there are no need for those disabled, there may be visitors, there may be some staff, or there may be some people living on site that require disabled parking. It's something that can be managed by them on site. So for example, if initially when people first move in, there's nobody that requires a disabled space, I'd rather the space not be marked out as a disabled space, because it's then available for additional parking with this development, and they can mark them up as and when they see fit, and if they need to mark up some more, then that's fine by us. It's on site, it's going to manage.
But surely disabled spaces are different size to normal parking size. You can't just swap them.
No, that's true, and that's why 5 have been marked out with the correct size of disabled spaces. In terms of our provision, so in a supermarket, there's different, sometimes we have a percentage that you provide. In this sense, it's one that would be determined, and obviously if we're working with the applicant, as far as we're concerned, 5 is, if they say they're the ones that operate this, but 5 are sufficient for what they need, then obviously that's fine with us.
Okay, members, any more questions? We're absolutely all done. Can we go to the recommendation then? The recommendation is set out on page 11 for approval, and obviously there are several pages there of conditions. There are no amendments to the conditions as such in the members' update, so if I go show of hands then, all those in favour of approving this application? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is it up, Michelle, is it up or down? I've seen it up.
I think I'm going to abstain, because I think it's open.
Okay. And all those against? And abstaining. That's 3 abstaining. So thank you very much, members. That application is passed. We now move on to agenda item 8, which is on page 47. Again, it's another specialist housing site, as we've been told. Reserve matters application again for 68 and bed care home. Its access, layout, appearance and landscaping is to be considered. Again, it's before the committee. It's a major application, and we have the same case officer, Christopher Howard. What's your hand over?
Mr. Chairman, again, as described, the application is as described by the Chairman. The applicant here is Evolution, Law Homes, Bovis Homes and Castle Oak. Castle Oak will be the end user operator of the extra care housing. I'm not going to go flying over the established principles again for the site, as we had these in the previous presentations, so I'm going to go straight to the specifics of the application of it itself. The application site is shown here in the context of the housing and is located where the star is shown. Access to the site will be through the estate roads from neighbourhood loop leading onto Highden Road and Dearden Way. This is the site in context of the anchor scheme. The site fronts onto the neighbourhood loop character area as identified by the design code for the village centre. The scheme is for a care home, formal development, and differs from the anchor scheme insofar as the care need for future residents will be higher and the accommodation is not laid out to have facilities that will support independent living. This shows the layout and context with the Castle Oak scheme, anchor scheme, and demonstrates a comprehensive approach to delivery. This is the proposed layout of the building together with associated landscaping and parking. The plans include communal outdoor space which is segregated from the parking. In terms of parking, there are 32 spaces and the highways officer is satisfied with the provision of parking. A further drop-off spaces included at the front of the building by the entrance. Landscaping is included in the communal gardens and car parking and towards the front of the building, and the landscaper officer supports the proposal. These are the elevations of the building. The proposal incorporates the 3-storey elements at the side of the building which are facing to the car park, and the majority of the buildings is in 2 stories in height with a pitched roof. The applicant has carefully considered the massing of the 3-storey element and has incorporated details such as render to break up the building. The height of the building is in accordance with plans. Final slides are perspective views of the care home. The upper view would front onto the car park at the side of the building. Render has been added to break up this elevation as shown on the previous slide, and this is in part in response to parish comments, although the photo montage here hasn't been updated. The lower photo montage is the rear of the building and shows the communal garden area. The final perspective shot shows the entrance of the building fronting onto the main street. The lower perspective shot shows the building in context of the anchor care home. A continuity of details such as materials and render for both schemes are enough to both buildings. The recommendation is to approve the application subject to the condition set report and those amended by the members' update. Just moving on to the members' update. In terms of the members' update, just a few corrections, etc. On page 47, correction to the summary section as per the previous application, the site is to the west of Hollowlane. On page 50, amend the list of plans to include the plan number as shown on the members' update in terms of landscaping. On page 50, delete condition 6, boundary treatments. This detail has already been provided, so we do not need those details. This is to do with fencing, which is shown on the plan above. And on page 50, a number is missing from the travel plan. This should be condition 5 and remaining conditions numbered up accordingly. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And once again, we have Elizabeth Fowler, the agent.
Further to my previous statement in relation to the anchor site, this reserve matters application relates to the southern part of the specialist housing site and has been progressed by Castle Oak. So we've already gone through the relevant background in terms of how both sites working together and comply with the outline parameters. For the Castle Oak proposal, the accommodation provided is more akin to a traditional care home, where the delivery of care is more intensive than to all residents. The building is split into 4 communities or wings of 17 residents each. Each community area will have its own databases and facilities, but are also linked to central community areas shared by all residents. This allows the delivery of care to be tailored to varying levels of care requirements for different residents. The emphasis is on resident dignity and privacy within a group living environment. Each bedroom includes an ensuite wet room with level access and handrails designed for use by those in need of assistance. An enclosed landscape residence garden maximises the opportunity to use outdoor amenity space, as well as visual enhancements for residents who are not sufficiently mobile to use the outdoor areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we have Councillor Patman again, ward member. Like to come forward.
Thank you, Chairman. I won't have too much to say on this one because I think the points that I made at the previous application follow on in the same way. Again, we're concerned about the fact that we are in a location that we consider prime, and that we want to make sure that we're getting the best benefit from it, and in the appearance in particular, we were concerned about that. I note that there's been recommendations made that the respective F, or elevation F, is going to be broken up with some sections to make it look a bit better, but that was the major concern that we've got with regards to this, and that is that it did look very samey and didn't seem to stand out as buildings that you would think was part of the premium development as you entered the area. And that's all was really as much to say on this one as possible.
Right, thank you very much. I shall open it up straight away then to members. Will, and then Michelle.
Yeah, I've gone through the plan. Facilities for mobility, scooters and vehicles for charging and storing. I didn't see it on the plan. Is it actually shown on the plan?
There is a storage area for cycles and mobility scooters. I think off the top of my head it was 3 mobility scooters. In terms of the proposal for the level of need, most people will not be able to leave the accommodation itself in the main.
Sounds a low number, 3.
Michelle, then Angus.
I have to admit, the better design than the last one. The last one was just plain ugly as can be, but that's about the only thing I can say about it.
Angus?
Never known Rochelle to say so little. Caught me out. I'd like to make the same point about the sprinklers as I made on the previous application, and note that okay, planning may not be able to do anything, but corporate policy should. Oh, also rather interesting, in this application there are no balconies. I think, or are there some in some places? Perhaps I could relate that also to another question which might come up on the same slides, Joe Christopher, and that is where the buildings for this application abut onto the previous application, are they 2 or 3 storey?
Page 78.
The element that sort of butts onto the anchor scheme is shown on the bottom picture here, and this element is 2-storey to the side for the this building. Mouse up. This is a car slope scheme, and this is the anchor scheme. So this element is 2-storey here, which again for the neighbourhood loop, for the character area, there is expected to be differences in building heights as part of the difference. The avenue is more defined by taller buildings at consistent height, or generally consistent height, to emphasise that main road.
Yeah, my concern that we didn't jump from 2 to 4 stories next to each other, and if that's covered, then I'm happy. The Parish Council raised a question about pedestrian access or way to the medical centre. Was that addressed in the scheme that we're seeing?